I work for a small tech company and get along pretty well with my boss, Dave. He's one of those guys who are easygoing and friendly. So when he invited me to go on a cruise with his family, I didn't think twice. It was going to be a 5-day trip just to get away from the daily grind. He brought along his wife, Karen, and his teenage son, Alex. Alex was about 16, a good kid, but you know how teenagers are, quiet and always on their phone. The first few days of the cruise were amazing. The food was great, the weather was perfect, and we had a good time exploring the different stops. There was plenty to do on board: swimming pools, game rooms, shows. Alex mostly kept to himself, hanging around the pool and meeting a few other kids his age. Everything seemed perfect. Then one night, things took a dark turn. I remember going to bed around midnight. My cabin was a couple of doors down from Dave's family suite. I was pretty tired after a long day in the sun, so I fell asleep quickly. The gentle rocking of the ship made it easy to drift off. At around 1:30 a.m., I was jolted awake by a loud knock on my door. Groggy and confused, I stumbled out of bed, wondering what was going on. When I opened the door, there was Dave, his face pale, his eyes wide with panic. "Has Alex come back to your room?" he asked, his voice trembling. "What? Why would he be here?" I replied, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. Dave looked at me with a mix of fear and confusion. He never came back to our room after dinner. We thought maybe he crashed here or with one of the other teens. Immediately, I felt a knot form in my stomach. Something was wrong. We both quickly got dressed and headed to the ship's customer service desk. Dave's wife, Karen, had already called them, but now we needed to make sure a full search was underway. They took it seriously, of course. A teenager missing on a cruise ship? That's no joke. Within minutes, they announced a search over the loudspeaker, and a team of staff started combing the decks. The ship was massive, like a floating city, so finding someone on it wasn't an easy task. We searched everywhere: the pool deck, the restaurants, the game rooms, the theaters, but there was no sign of Alex. As the hours passed, panic set in. I could see it in Dave and Karen's faces, and to be honest, I was feeling it too. This was supposed to be a fun, relaxing trip. How did it turn into a nightmare so fast? By 3 a.m., the ship's crew suggested we start checking some of the closed-off areas, the empty rooms and parts of the ship that weren't being used. It was a long shot, but at that point we were desperate. We split into groups, each of us assigned to a different part of the ship. I ended up with one of the ship's security guards, a big guy with a stern face. We started going through the empty rooms, one by one. Most of them were completely dark, the lights off, the beds made. It was eerie how quiet it was. The only sound was the hum of the ship's engines in the background. Then, just as we were about to call it quits, we opened a door and found him. Alex was sitting on the floor, his hands tied behind his back with rope, his mouth gagged with a dirty cloth. His eyes were wide with terror. For a moment, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like something out of a horror movie. We rushed to untie him, and as soon as the gag was out of his mouth, he started crying. He was shaking and his face was pale. He told me not to say anything, Alex stammered, barely able to get the words out. He said if I told anyone, he'd kill my family. Who? I asked, my heart pounding. Who did this to you? Alex looked around nervously as if the man might be standing right behind us. A man dressed in black. He grabbed me when I was walking back to the room. He dragged me in here and tied me up. The fear in his eyes was unmistakable. This wasn't some prank or misunderstanding. Someone had deliberately taken him and threatened him. And that someone was still on the ship. We immediately called security, and they locked down the area. They started reviewing security camera footage, trying to find any sign of the man Alex had described. Meanwhile, Dave and Karen were beside themselves with relief and terror. They couldn't believe what had just happened to their son. Then things took another unexpected twist. The next morning, after hours of reviewing footage and interviewing staff, security identified a suspect. It was someone we all knew, a guy from our company. I couldn't believe it. He was just a quiet guy from the accounting department. We'd had drinks with him the night before, and he seemed completely normal. But there he was, caught on camera, lurking around the empty parts of the ship, following Alex. When security brought him in, he didn't even try to deny it. He just sat there, staring at the ground as they cuffed him and handed him over to the authorities at the next port. It turned out he had some sort of grudge against Dave. He thought kidnapping Alex would scare Dave and ruin him, but he didn't count on the ship's security and the cameras catching him. Even now, months after the cruise, I still think about that night. The way the ship felt so peaceful and safe, only to turn into a place of fear and danger. And that quiet guy from accounting, someone I would have never suspected, planning something so twisted. I'm not sure I'll ever be able to set foot on a cruise ship again. The ocean may be vast, but nowhere is safe when you don't know what kind of monsters might be hiding in plain sight. Before we get into the next story, if you come for the first time, please make sure to subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon for upcoming scary stories. We need your support. Please share these stories with your friends and family. Thanks. I was 13 years old when my family decided to go on a trip to Antarctica. It was a big deal because we were traveling on a huge cruise ship, and I had never been on one before. I remember feeling excited, my mind buzzing with thoughts of the icy landscapes and the idea of exploring such a large ship. There were so many things to see, and I couldn't wait to check them out. My family and I spent our days enjoying the ship's activities, but as night fell, things became quieter, calmer, almost eerie in the stillness. There was something about the vastness of the ship at night that made it feel almost alive. One night I couldn't sleep. I looked at the clock next to my bed. 2 a.m. The ship was silent, apart from the occasional creak and groan as it moved through the water. My parents and little sister were fast asleep in our cabin. The quietness felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me. I decided that this would be the perfect time to explore the ship by myself. I didn't think I'd get into any trouble. After all, how much could happen on a cruise? I slipped out of bed, careful not to make any noise, and quietly opened the cabin door. The hallway outside was dimly lit, and the long corridor stretched ahead of me like a tunnel. It felt strange to be walking alone at this hour, but I was too curious to turn back. I wandered down the hall, through the empty dining area, and then to one of the upper decks. That's when I saw him. A boy, maybe around 17 or 18 years old, was standing near the railing, looking out over the dark sea. His name was Robert, though I didn't know that at the time. He turned when he noticed me, and for a moment I felt uneasy. His eyes were sharp, and there was something about his expression that made me pause. "You're out late," he said, his voice low but friendly enough. "What are you doing wandering around at this hour?" I shrugged. Just couldn't sleep. Wanted to explore. Robert smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Perfect timing. I know this ship inside and out. I can show you around if you want." I wasn't sure what to say. A part of me was thrilled by the idea of seeing parts of the ship I hadn't yet explored, but another part of me felt off. But Robert seemed confident, like he knew what he was doing, so I agreed. We walked together, moving through parts of the ship that seemed to be completely deserted. As we went along, Robert started talking about himself. He told me that he had been on the cruise for weeks, traveling from one place to another. He said he knew all the secrets of the ship, the places where no one went, the best spots to hide if you didn't want to be found. At first I thought it was cool. Who wouldn't want to know all the hidden places on a ship this big? But then his stories started to get darker. He talked about sneaking into passengers' cabins when they weren't there, stealing things just for the thrill of it. He even laughed as he described taking a wallet from a man who was fast asleep by the pool. I remember feeling uncomfortable as he spoke. His grin widened as he told me about the rush he got from doing bad things, like robbing people for fun. He talked about how easy it was to get away with it on a cruise. Everyone was on vacation, no one was paying attention. "I could teach you," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "We could be a team. You'd never get caught." That was the moment I knew I had to get away from him. My heart was pounding and my hands were sweaty. This wasn't the kind of adventure I wanted. I just wanted to explore the ship, not get mixed up in something bad. I made some excuses about being tired and needing to get back to my cabin. Robert just nodded, still smiling, as if he knew something I didn't. I hurried back to my cabin, my footsteps quick and quiet on the carpeted floor. When I closed the door behind me, I felt a huge wave of relief. I didn't want to think about Robert or the things he'd said. I crawled back into bed, pulling the blanket up to my chin, and tried to push it all out of my mind. For the next few days, I avoided going out alone at night. I stuck close to my family and made sure I didn't run into Robert again. It was easy enough. There were hundreds of passengers on the ship, and I didn't see him during the day. Then something happened that I'll never forget. A man was caught stealing from a wealthy businessman on the ship. He had stolen a gold watch, something very valuable. I overheard some of the adults talking about it, saying that the thief had been arrested and was being held by the ship's security until we reached the next port. My heart sank when I heard them mention the thief's name. It was Robert. If I had stayed with him that night, if I had accepted his offer to team up, I might have been caught too. I couldn't believe how close I had come to getting involved in something terrible. I was lucky, so lucky that I hadn't listened to him. The rest of the trip felt different after that. The excitement I had felt at the beginning was gone, replaced by a quiet unease. I stayed with my family and made sure I was never alone again. The cruise was beautiful and the sights were incredible, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something very dangerous. I never saw Robert again after he was arrested, and I was glad. My name is Alina, and I was traveling alone on a cruise to visit my family, who live on a small island far away. It was meant to be a peaceful trip. I had been looking forward to this journey for weeks, imagining the cool ocean breeze and quiet days at sea. But something happened that I'll never forget, something that still makes me feel uneasy whenever I think about it. It was my second night on the cruise, and I was already feeling a little unsettled. The ship was much larger than I had expected, with long, narrow hallways that seemed to stretch forever. My cabin was on the lower deck, tucked away from the busier parts of the ship. At first, I liked the quiet. It gave me space to think and relax. But as the hours passed, the silence became almost too heavy. The gentle rocking of the ship and the faint hum of the engine were the only sounds. The night started normally enough. I had dinner, strolled around the deck under the stars, and then returned to my cabin to get some sleep. I wasn't feeling tired yet, so I spent some time reading before finally turning off the lights. I don't know how long I had been asleep when it happened, but I suddenly woke up. The room was dark, but the dim glow from the hallway light seeped in through the edges of the door. Everything was quiet, and for a moment, I thought maybe I had just woken up for no reason. Then I heard it, a soft knock on my door. It was so faint that I wasn't even sure I had heard it at first. I sat up in bed, listening carefully. The knock came again, gentle but clear. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Who would be knocking on my door at this hour? I glanced at the clock on the small table next to my bed. It was 3 a.m. I hesitated for a moment, then slowly got out of bed and walked to the door. My hand hovered over the doorknob as I peered through the peephole, expecting to see someone outside. But there was no one. The hallway was empty, silent, except for the distant creaking of the ship. My heart began to race as I opened the door slightly, just to be sure. I looked both ways down the hall, but no one was there. I stood there for a few seconds, feeling uneasy. Maybe it was just a prank, I thought. Maybe someone had knocked on the wrong door by mistake. I closed the door, locked it, and went back to bed, trying to shake off the strange feeling that something wasn't right. But sleep didn't come easily. I lay there in the darkness, staring up at the ceiling, listening to the soft creaks and groans of the ship. My mind kept drifting back to the knock. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then something else happened. I was lying on my side, facing the wall, when I felt like someone was watching me. It was an odd feeling, one I couldn't explain. My body froze, and I slowly turned my head to look around the room. That's when I saw him. There, standing in the corner of my room, was a man, or at least, it looked like a man. He was tall and shadowy, his features hard to make out in the dim light. But I could see his eyes. They were dark and hollow, and they were staring directly at me. He didn't move, didn't say a word. He just stood there watching me. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could barely breathe. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. I couldn't take my eyes off him, frozen in terror. It was like my body refused to move. Finally, I gathered enough courage to leap out of bed. I didn't care about anything else. I had to get out of that room. I bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock before pulling it open and running out into the hallway. I didn't stop running until I reached the lobby, where a few of the cruise staff were still awake. I was shaking, gasping for breath, and when I told them what had happened, they immediately sent security to check my room. I followed them back, staying a few steps behind, my heart still racing. When they opened the door, the room was empty. There was no one there. The man, the shadowy figure I had seen, was gone. The security team tried to assure me that it was probably just a dream, or maybe I had imagined it. But I knew what I had seen. I knew that man was real, or at least he had been. Later that day, one of the workers on the ship approached me. He seemed hesitant at first, like he wasn't sure if he should tell me what he knew. But eventually he spoke. He told me that the room I was staying in had a history. Years ago, a man named Hendrik had died in that very room. The details of his death were unclear, but ever since then, strange things had been reported by guests who stayed in the room. Some heard knocking, others saw shadows, and a few, like me, had seen the man himself. As he spoke, a chill ran down my spine. It was the same room, the same corner where I'd seen that figure standing. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't stay in that room any longer, so I asked to be moved to a different cabin. For the rest of the trip, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me. When I finally reached my family's island, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But even now, whenever I think back to that night, the memory of those hollow eyes staring at me in the darkness still sends chills through my body.